Hey everyone, welcome to the Sponsor CX webinar, meeting today's biggest sponsorship challenges. I'm Jim Andrews, and I am joined by Sponsor CX CEO Jason Smith and the Head of Business Partnerships, or is that right, Doug? Hey, I screw up your title already?
Call it whatever you want. Right? I get called all different things every day right there. Head of Strategic Partnerships.
Strategic partnerships. That's awesome, and the newest member of Sponsor CX. So really happy and excited to be joining these two gentlemen and all of you as we've kind of promoted in all of our materials on LinkedIn, the videos we made. We really would love this to be your opportunity to ask questions of us, bring us your challenges, throw anything you got at us and let us take a stab at it. So we also have some things that we've been talking about in preparation for this, some of the conversations that all of us are having with different clients in our various businesses. And we thought we'd start there, just kind of give you a chance to settle in and start thinking about your questions. So why don't we, this was one that came up very early on with in our conversations, which was the idea of sponsorship renewals. And I'm not sure if everybody's, hopefully everybody's hearing us. I know I'm seeing some of our images are going in and out here, but I'm gonna hope that we're still live. And Laura, let me know if we're not.
We're not seeing any slides, but we are seeing we're not seeing your video anymore, Jim.
Okay, yeah, then there are no slides. It's just supposed to be the three of us on the screen.
Okay.
So
your video just went away.
Okay,
that's all that happened.
Okay, we'll try and figure that out. But as long as you can hear me, I guess that's the main.
Hear you.
Okay, good. Thanks. So as I was saying, sponsorship renewals. Listen, they've never been automatic, right? You always have to work for renewals, but it seems like they're getting more difficult than ever to kind of secure those. And so I like to talk about that. Why do we think that is? Why is it getting harder? Has something changed? Because I've heard, and I think Doug, you mentioned it, you heard too, that some people are saying renewals are almost as hard to close as new business these days.
There's no question. It started changing, I would say, after COVID. It was that real change, but previous to that, we always talk about like the industry standard. It was about 92-93% of renewal rates. So for every dollar that you got, you're going to get back $92-93. Those rates are gone now. So as I say to people, you kiss the ground to get those. I think there's a lot of reasons why. Number one is company turnover, because let's say you are a brand and you're doing business with whatever team it is. The person who's bringing it in is there today, but sometimes gone tomorrow. So now the team has to pivot and resell to that company because no one's coming in and saying, hey, what you were doing was great. So you literally have to resell all the time. And then I think also is that companies are changing constantly. It's not just here's our approach for 2026 and it's January 1 and we're going to have the same approach for 12 months. Right. They are pivoting on not only a quarterly, but on a monthly basis. So I think those are some of the key factors there.
Yeah. Jason, are you seeing anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think from every year, just based on what Doug said, they're reevaluating and marketing decisions change all the time. And, the ROI expectations are even higher than they ever have been. And I've said this before, but CFOs are so much more involved. You have to start proving out the return on that investment a lot more right now. And it's not just not just the CMO, that you have to sell on it. Is a whole lot more, like most of the C-suite really, to get them in that renewal. And you almost have to treat it as even though it might be a multi-year agreement, you got to start treating it like a renewal every year, and showing and proving out what their objectives are and making sure that you're being proactive and showing that to them. So when I sat on the brand side of the business, we usually, from a marketing standpoint, tried to keep our marketing spend. Like if we had the overall marketing budget for the entire year, and I'm using a generic number, of like $10 million, right? 20% of that, 15 to 20% of that is going to go to sponsorship, right? And that's a healthy ratio for a brand when it comes to if they're going to be involved in sponsorship, 15 to 20% is healthy. 20 actually starts to get a little bit on the high side. And so when you start looking at that, and you start looking at the amount of dollars that are being spent, especially these big national brands that have hundreds of millions of dollars, that they're spending, that starts to be really scrutinized. But if you're wanting to try and get the other 80%, of the marketing budget, you really have to start to show that kind of goes back to my ROI with the CFO. You got to really start to show a little bit more of the ROI, and what their objectives are, and be consistent with it, because it becomes a real challenge. If not, gone are the days of signing the deal, just kind of building the relationship, and then at the end of the term, just sign up for renewal, and you had a great relationship with it. Don't get me wrong, relationships are really important, but brands, I think that's the foundation, is the relationship. But you have got to keep showing value to the brands all the time and consistently, as part of the renewals, to make the renewals a lot easier for you.
Well, and I think your two responses are linked, right? Because if you've got that turnover, as Doug said, you've got people who coming in who don't know what happened before, so maybe skeptical. But if you have that proof of performance, if you've done the right things in terms of evaluating and measuring, and I'm talking about both sides, both the property and the brand, there should be evidence that new person coming in and sitting in that seat can look and say, hey, this is a great deal. I see all of the things that we've been getting from it. So I am even just willing to consider the renewal, even if I've got maybe some of my own ideas about things I want to do. How am I going to say no to this when you've proven to me that it's working?
Well, and Jim, this is how complicated it gets. And Doug mentioned this too, is you've got so many different brands that are sponsoring your organization, and you need to know what the specific needs are for each one of those brands. You see how complicated that can get?
Yeah.
Because Nike might have a different set of requirements that they need to show what they feel is the true value as Joe's Aquarium, down the street, there. So you have to be able to weigh. How do you like Joe's Aquarium, by the way? It's like, that's my go-to generic brand. You've got to be able to do that. And if you've got 50 brands, 100 brands, 20 brands, I mean, that's a lot of moving pieces, and you've got to be organized to be able to make sure to know what, each one of those brands need, because they're going to be vastly different.
Right. Well, and I think that also, you mentioned that the sheer number of partners or sponsors, whatever terminology you want to use, and that's part of the issue too, is we have there's so much inventory now within any one property. When you start to add in all of the digital opportunities, let alone the standard kind of signage and visibility stuff, plus the tickets and the hospitality and everything else that goes into these, at some point you've got to start prioritizing, right? Because you go back to Joe's Aquarium. Okay, how much work can we do for them? If are they really a partner, or are they really, again, an advertiser or a sponsor in that level? They're buying some signage, they're buying some visibility. We hope they're happy with it. We can give them some reports on what that looks like. But it's those higher level, those real partnerships where we're talking about the full-on integrated activation, and we're talking about obviously a higher price tag and a bigger fee coming in. That those are the ones that maybe we need to prioritize a little bit more in terms of how do we make sure we're telling these folks exactly what they're getting and showing them what they're getting.
Yeah, and proactivity versus reactivity, way better when it comes to renewal. Don't wait around. Be proactive. So
yeah. Jason, it's funny you said that, because you and I had a boss for a few years that really taught us that in touch points. And people forget about that, right? There, you've got to kind of establish those touch points from the moment you bring in somebody. And again, everybody's different, right? Of how they want to be touched and how many times you want to do this. But you can't just sell the contract today and in 3 years have that conversation with them. It's whether, again, you're setting up monthly or biweekly, whatever you are, for that to have these conversations with them. I think that's so important because people forget about that, but that's a key.
Throwing this on, because you mentioned, Jason, CFOs, right, and finance departments and all of those folks who have gotten much more involved in sponsorship decisions than they did back when we all started doing this. How do you start to look and structure deals and conversations so that those financial people are an ally up front, not a roadblock? We talk about it's obviously measurement on the backside. We're proving to them, but are there certain things to do even as you're entering into the negotiations? You're putting packages and proposals together that speak to that department, the finance department.
Yeah, I mean, I'm smiling because it's like, because they do care about relationships, but they don't at the same time. Like the CMO and the head of sales, or those people that you kind of deal with on like a day-to-day basis, the marketing people, like of course they're going to care about relationships and things. CFO does too, but at the end of the day, the CFO is looking at outcomes, right? And so you could present like, hey, we hosted you on the field and we did all these other things for you and we did all this. The CFO's not necessarily going to care about that. They're going to care about the outcomes to the business. And when you have to speak their language. So if there is signage or if there is a actionable marketing asset that help drive business, you need to speak the language to the CFO, which are, specific business outcomes to the real impact to sales to the organization and revenue to the organization. That's where actionable marketing assets come into play. And many of you that have been on some of our webinars, you've heard me talk about this. It's so important to have those actionable marketing assets, traffic driving, ROI showing assets of this is the kind of impact that it's had. In my world, when I sat on the brand side, I worked for a financial institution. So it's like, how many checking accounts, how many products per household have we provided, for you as part of this promotion or this sponsorship? What kind of auto loans have we produced from this? And what assets did we provide to help drive that business? That's what a CFO wants to hear. They want to hear that. When they can see and visualize and you speak their language that way, that's when you start to make strides. And then the dollars come really easy. So then when you go ask for that $1 million, they're like, wow, yeah, I trust these guys because they showed me what they've done. And my marketing team is also, in cahoots with them on that too.
I think too is as it's important for the buyer to find out their metrics, right? Of what's being used to evaluate. So to really show their ROI, you've got to ask those same questions to the market, to the finance person. Just ask it. And I think a lot of people are always intimidated by them, but you can't be. You've got to just ask them, because again, that's going to come up in 2-3 years if you don't ask that and find out, because then hey, this is what they are looking for in order to make this work.
Yeah, that question of what does success look like for you, so important up front there. I just want to go back and first of all, I want to remind everybody, send in your questions. That's what we're here for. So we definitely want to hear from you. I see we've got more than 60 or 70 folks with us. I know you've got questions out there, you've got challenges, and we want to help you out with those. just back on renewals for just a second. When a renewal is at risk and you're really sensing that you're getting pushback and you're thinking, boy, this is not heading in the right direction. Is there a recovery playbook from your experiences, guys?
I think yes, if you do it correctly. Number one is I think a lot of sellers at teams aren't very transparent with their own team. So you've got to be transparent. You got to tell them here's what's happening. But the teams that are doing it right are willing to restructure. At the beginning of my career, when we'd sell, if you got, if I bought A, B, and C, that's all you received. Now, again, sometimes after 3 months from now, they don't need those or want those. So if you're able to pivot and reallocate some of those things, you're having a better shot at keeping them. And then again let's again take it deeper dive. Once you bring in someone, you've got to establish those touch points early on in the relationship so you could identify the KPIs and the return on investment and know that could change on a dime.
Well, and I think transparency is really important at that point too, right? Just being honest and saying, look, we understand that maybe some of the goals weren't met. But we think we have some ideas we want to discuss some ideas for you and how we can turn that around, make some changes for next time. So, we're hoping you're not going to give up on it after one term or something like that. Jason.
Yeah, you got to get to the real issues quickly. The more that you kick the can down the road, the worse off it gets. Right. So as soon as they need to know immediately, but also bring solutions as well. Don't just bring them the issues. Say, okay, here's the issue. This is what we would like to do. But again, going back to the questions, and you guys mentioned this too, of like, okay, let's go back to your goals, like of the 5 pillars of what they want to be able to accomplish with the sponsorship. And if you know those, and if we're not meeting two of the 5, what can we adjust, as you mentioned, Doug, in the partnership to help maybe do that. And it might mean bonusing a little bit, to help get it there as well too. So addressing it early, show true partnership, don't kick it down the road and say, oh, we'll address it later, or I hope they don't notice. I mean, that's integrity too. You got to make sure you have high integrity with your sponsorship program as well too. But yeah, and those are just the things that come to my mind.
Jason, it's funny. I go back into how many years ago when you're sitting on your Monday meetings, working for teams and you're going over accounts and you say, company X, Y, or Z, and you're like, oh, it's a DOA, and you kind of skip it rather than let's address it. What's their problem? Number one, what do we need to do to make it work for them? Right. Because I think it's really adjusting it's all about the team. No, it's really got to be all about the person or people that are spending money with you. And again, every dollar counts in making it work for them, being able to adjust. But I just always go back to that. Oh, it's a DOA. Let's move on.
Why? Yeah, I know when I sponsor, when we sponsored different organizations as a brand, I actually appreciated when they would come and be like, hey, we dropped the ball here. It actually built more trust for me in them. And then it became a true kind of collaboration. Okay, let's link arms together and figure it out. And if someone's going to beat you up over it, you got to ask yourself, are you in the right partnership? Do you even want that partnership? That's a real question. What kind of partnerships do you want? Do you want ones that use issues as a beating stick? Or do you want them to actually strengthen your relationship and use it as a way to actually help better the partnership as well? That's how I look at it. I ask myself questions all the time. Like if we have a challenging customer, I'll be like, do we want them? Do we want them or not? And so you have to look at it that way, and just make sure you're partnering and working with people that you enjoy working with. I think that you're going to link arms together and not beat each other with issues.
Well, and to Doug's point too, I mean, just, writing somebody off because it's, they've given some bad indications. It's like, I'm a big believer in the profit in sponsorship is in renewals, right? I mean, it takes a lot of work to go out and recruit those new partners. I mean, if you've got somebody, you've got an existing relationship, I'm in the camp of let's do everything we can before we give up on it to try and keep them. Because again, that's, we want to keep our partners coming back. We don't want to have to start going out every cycle with an open slate and all these open categories and trying to fill them, right? So. Hey, Jason, Lisa asked a question following up on something you said about how do you get that level of detail for the ROI? How do you know it was the sponsorship that caused the opening of a checking account and not all of the other marketing that the company was doing? That's a very, very classic sponsorship measurement question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I probably won't get into it here, but I have kind of like my 5 pillars of sponsorship. And one of them is, and you just heard me say, actionable marketing assets. And really that can be a conglomeration of a lot of assets as well that create some sort of a promotion or a traffic driving type of asset. I'll use an example that we had and this is for a credit union. For a given month, we needed to increase products per household, and we wanted to increase checking accounts. And so I came to the Utah Jazz and I said, these are 2 things that I need to do this month. How can we use the assets that we have in order to drive that? And we came up with a promotion where for every new checking account, and we used radio, we used email, we used social, we used all sorts of assets to do this. But every time someone came in and said, hey, I want to open a checking account, I saw this promotion. And the promotion was you would get a replica jersey, Jazz jersey, every time you signed up for a new checking account. Or if you signed up for youth accounts, which increased our product per household, you would get a couple tickets to a game, type of thing. And so we drove this promotion, and we did tie a promo code to it. So when they came into the branch and asked about it, or they called, or they went to the website and entered it in, we knew where it came from, and we were able to track that specifically back to hundreds and hundreds of new accounts. Our product per household went up significantly. Checking accounts went up significantly, and I was able to, as a brand, I was able to see that. And I was able to directly correlate it to my sponsorship with the Utah Jazz. So that's an example of one where you can look at your assets and say, what can I do in order to show that back? So now when we go back to renewal, we can actually show what's been done there. Now I'm tracking it on the brand side. That's where you have to have a really strong relationship and partnership with the brand so that it can be transparent on how it's doing. I did that. I shared. I would let the Jazz know how successful it was, right? And we talked about it. Hey, how many checking accounts have come in? They would want to know, right? So they would proactively ask, and I would proactively tell. And by the end of the month, we were able to have, and that's a healthy relationship, right? To be able to show that. And it was really successful. So in my renewal, what do you think I wanted to have in my renewal? I wanted to make sure I had that, in there. So hopefully that answers the question on that.
Another question came in from Nolan, and he's got definitely a challenge here. And of course, now my screen is not letting me see the top of it. There it is. So he's basically got billboards. I'm going to kind of condense the question here. We've got sponsors who don't think that their company is getting business from their advertisements. How do you explain that their ads are getting noticed? It's kind of like a billboard, no metrics aside from traffic to tell them how much their company is being noticed. Yeah, I mean, love to hear from you guys. My first thought on that one, Nolan, is, that's a conversation, again, the kind of upfront conversations is, look, no signage, no billboard is ever really attached directly to a sale, right? I don't know anybody that says we put up, a billboard on Highway 1 and we drove, 10% more sales. Doesn't happen that way. So I think that, part of that is kind of managing the expectations, right? That obviously, those kinds of, you're driving those kinds of impressions, you're doing all kinds of things at the top of the funnel, right? To get people aware of the company, aware of the brand. And that's important. There are other things that also have to do, though, that, when we get down to actually driving the sale and linking it to a sale. So again, part of that for me is that, look, we're going to help you if that's what you're buying from us, those kinds of assets. We're going to help you at the top of the funnel. That's not necessarily going to answer the question of, what's happening at the bottom.
I think too, what a lot of companies are pivoting to now is utilizing their signage to incorporate what they're doing on all aspects of their advertising. So, because again, it's very tough if you're watching a baseball game or a basketball game, you see a sign in the outfield or on the court, whatever, unless it's like, hit the bull, win a steak on that one. Obviously, that from Bull Durham, but take that aside, it's very hard to track. I think the only real sport that you could probably track something would be baseball, home plate live, and see if it's, if there's web traffic or going to Instagram or whatever that is, but that it's real hard to do it. So instead of doing that, again, find out what their overall strategy is and see if you could wrap that in. Again, let's say it's, Utah Jazz win, you win promotion, whatever it is, talk about that promotion on that signage, right? Because that's incorporating all the assets that you're doing in order to make it work and drive traffic in if they win.
Yeah, no, that's great. Question from Casey, and this is, I think a really good question. We talk about, when things don't go right. She said, when a mistake or error is made with sponsorships, what is your preferred method of making it right? Refund, discount for the next time, offering something additional for free? Either one of you want to talk about what you've done in those kinds of circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I never want to go backwards in revenue, right?
Exactly.
So I would again just look at the things that are most important to them, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's like, hey, let's readjust, where those are, and then I typically would go above and beyond, right? Like I probably would add some additional bonus assets that tie back to what they need, right? And so try and go a little bit above and beyond to try and make up for that. And but you have to sell again, right? You have to show like this is why this is going to be beneficial for them. Hey, thanks for again linking arms together. Like I'm doing all that I can to make sure that this is actually going to be, maybe even a better solution, for you, or even just sit there and why not like collaborate with them? Like what is important? Like why not just bring them into your room together to collaborate and make a decision together on it, rather than you saying this is what it's going to be. Like have them come in and just be part of the decision making process, and then they feel like they have ownership, in it too.
I think what's big too, Jason, is the people that are willing to admit that they screwed up. Hey, we screwed up. That is on us, right?
Yeah,
We're gonna
totally.
make it work, right? But then go back to what makes that person tick, right? Is it something that, again, they need an asset? Obviously you don't want to give them an asset that's going to probably cost you money at the end of the day. So it you kind of can play with. But there's also sometimes the people, want experiences. I go back to when my kids were younger, when I went to restaurants, I knew the restaurants that were very kid friendly, and I knew the restaurants that weren't kid friendly. So if you take care of my kids, I'm coming back. So same thing like that is what makes this person tick? What can I do to them to make it worth their time? And again, apologize. But again, people are afraid to say, I'm sorry, we really screwed up, but we're going to make this work. Right. And I think that's where it also comes down to relationships, and be very honest with them and say, we messed up. So let's come up with, again, as you said, Jason, let's come up with something together that's going to make it worth it. Again, make it all better for you. Make it good.
Well, and I think, we saw that the proof of that with COVID, right? Nobody made a mistake there, but assets and benefits went away through nobody's fault. And we all had to sit down and say, okay, how are we going to make this right for both parties, right?
It's actually really, sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, we had to just, figure out how, it's like, I at this point, obviously, the property was not in a position to give money back. They were closing their doors, and tickets and all their other revenue streams are going away. So we knew that wasn't an option. So how are we going to make it fair?
Yeah, and I was gonna mention. Sorry, I interrupted you there, Jim. With COVID too, like I sat in the brand seat during that time, and all of our groups were coming to us like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Can you brainstorm? Can you help? And it was tricky, but like I went to executive leadership and I said, listen, if we can work with these groups that we sponsor on the other side of this, we will benefit significantly because we were true partners with them to try and figure out to still get I'm not saying we just hand over money and don't get value back. We get as much value as we can in digital assets or whatever it may be, but try to keep as much of these partnerships funded the way that we need to. And it will benefit us long-term on the other side of this. And it did significantly. So when other brands were coming and using the beating stick of COVID we're not paying for this, we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we were doing the opposite. We were saying, hey, let's grab as much value as we can. And there may be some instances where we didn't pay as much, just because of the nature of what we were sponsoring. Right. But man, that partnership together, that meant a lot during a tough time to those properties, to where we were able to get so much more value on the other side of COVID because of how we treated those relationships. That's just a side note of like how, again, to link arms and be more partner-esque rather than like just using a challenge as a way to save money or to get out of things. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of folks interested in ROI, not surprisingly. Jeff asked the question, does the responsibility of tracking fall on the sponsor side or the client side? My quick answer to that would be both. The ultimate responsibility, if I'm the VP of sponsorship, I've got the CFO and the CMO and the CEO who are coming to me and saying, did that money that you wanted, that you invested in that sponsorship, did it work? I own that, right? That's my job on the line to say yes. But if I'm the property partner, it's my responsibility to help out that VP of sponsorship and give him all of the information and the data that I can to help him build the case when he has to go in and sit in front of the CFO and the CEO and justify why we spent that money.
You nailed it, Jim. I mean, yeah, they've got to be a resource to help on the sales side. You got to help. And on fulfillment activation, you got to help. Tool them up with what is successful, because their job is to go show the value, right? But you have to help them be able to show that value, and those that help them will get the renewals. We just talked about renewal. that will be more helpful. So, and then those that are on the sponsorship sales side that want to be on the brand side, the more that you can start thinking like a brand marketer, the more opportunities you have in other, like if you want to go from sales to brand marketing side, like you got to understand that. You got to be able to, I think it's very valuable, people who come from sales into brand marketing roles, because they understand, how sponsorships are sold. But man, if you can start to tweak your mind a little bit, the opportunities for your career change significantly as well.
That's a great point, Jason. Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes down to, a little CYA, right? So you've got to establish, though, at the very beginning of the relationship.
Spoken like a true sales guy, Doug.
That's right. But what they need to see, right? What and again is, what do I always say when I was selling? Hey, my goal is for you to hit your goals. That's it, right? So what do I need? What do I need to provide you, so to make you look like a superstar? And you're saying that not being salesy, but you're saying that because, again, is what's a 1 year relationship? You want a multi-year, and to make them look good, and then they're going to want more. And more importantly, when people ask, they're going to say, yes, this worked, which helps you get more and more. It's all about just making your circle larger. So it's really establishing those questions up front and saying, how am I going to make you successful in this? And then you know what you need to do, and they know what they need to do to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question from Kevin. Is there a trend on the overall objectives for what brands are looking for? Are they looking for awareness, experiences, social media, community impact, or a mix of everything? Certainly the easy answer there is a mix of everything. Everybody wants everything, but are either of you seeing any kind of trends in what's most important to the brands and the folks that you're working with?
Jason, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm a big believer in the mix, and maybe I'll get him into it here. But we talked about actionable marketing. You've got your big brand assets. You've got your media elements. You got to have media, even if it's social media. You got to have some sort of to the masses. Media is a big piece of it. Business development opportunities, I think providing experiences to the brand's customers that only you can provide is really important. So if it is, I talked about this with the CFO, that he may not care, but he may care if you brought their $5 million customer down on the field and they renewed their deal, because you provided them this great, amazing experience, right? So there's the business development side of it. And then there's the community involvement. I think that's starting to get a lot more traction, is the give back piece to it, using sponsorship assets to be able to give back to either a charitable organization or some way into the community. And I think that's a big piece. So, from a sport, I'll use a sports one, to where, every, hockey goal scored, $50 is donated to cancer treatment, right? Or, for, being able to submit, having fans being able to submit a $5,000 donation to their favorite charity sponsored by, XYZ brand, right? So I think doing a lot of that good in the community are also assets that I think that are just things that brands are doing that are kind of high trending right now.
And I think too is, a lot of times they're looking to move the needle. And unfortunately, it's funny, right? You could spend $10 gazillion in all your advertising, but it's funny that sometimes that company or the CFO will just hone in on sponsorships because he or she's watching a game that they see something at, right? They're not talking about any of the other things that you spent your money on, but they went to a game and saw your sign and they're like, is it working? But I think a lot of it will come down to is it helping move the needle in whatever you're trying to do? Again, that's coming up with or what are your pain points? What are you looking to do? What are you looking to accomplish? And how can we help them? And then, but what you're seeing more and more now is whatever assets you're getting, I think they're combining them with other assets outside of the team. So there are other advertising that they're doing and making it come in as one, where that was not like that before. More and more, you're seeing that today.
Yeah. So it's not like a huge trend either away from or towards any of these objectives. I think it's, been involved in surveys of sponsors going back decades, and there really wasn't, a huge shift. But I think it is all about that mix. And I think both, what Doug and Jason said, really hits it on the head in terms of being able to do multiple things, to do the storytelling, to bring in other, kind of leverage the sponsorship spend across every other things that you're doing in marketing. I mean, that's the great thing about sponsorships is it allows you to connect, whether it's your loyalty program, whether it's content marketing, digital marketing that you're doing, that sponsorship, that platform, that partnership can just be the theme and the thread that runs throughout all of those kinds of things.
And I would also add too, Jim, to be careful of just a brand wanting to come in and just do one of those things, right? That actually probably won't lead to long-term success if they don't have the mix. I think if they're spreading themselves out a little bit into all these, it all works harmoniously. But if they just come in and say, I just want the brand, you probably need to just ask them some more questions, like to really understand what their objectives are, because their objective might be, I just want to see my brand in the lights. And that's not a healthy response. That's going to be not a very good renewal, for you.
Exactly. And perfect timing, Jason, because we've gotten a question about patch deals, and I know it was something that the three of us have discussed earlier, and I think that fits in really well with that, because we've seen a lot of brands come in doing patch deals, whether it's pro sports or now as we start to see them emerge in college sports, and they're what I call the no-name brands, the kind of what you see the announcement and you go, who? What? I've never heard of it. What company is that? What do they do? And those, I think, do exactly a lot of times what you're talking about, Jason. They come in and they want that big hit. They want that exposure, and it makes sense that's that is their primary objective. They're either a challenger brand, they're an upstart. They need to establish themselves and get people to know their name and think highly of them. All that kind of stuff.
It's an important element to the sponsorship for them. The branding, for sure.
Yeah. But they also then might be, and we've seen some examples where they were one and dones. They came in, they got the big hit from their patch, and then they went on. I mean, I remember I did a little bit of research into the NBA patch deals and the amount of turnover since that was introduced 8-9 years ago. Is a lot more than I think we anticipated. And I think it was for that reason. You had a lot of companies coming in saying, okay, we had our moment in the spotlight and now we're out, either because they didn't have budgets that could sustain that level of investment or whatever it was. So getting back to that idea of patches, are there things that you think properties can be doing when you're talking to companies that they're interested in those kinds of opportunities? They may not be familiar with all of the things that a sponsorship can do. How do you kind of have that conversation to say, look, we can give you this and we know it's important, but you might want to consider looking at this more of as a partnership than just this ability to get a lot of eyeballs on you.
Well, a lot of them have never done this before, right? So you have to educate them.
Yeah.
And you got to be an educator of sponsorship, for them. And you got to keep it simple for them. And this is going to probably go against what everybody else is thinking, but I think you need to keep it small with them. You've even mentioned this, Jim. How many like crypto deals have we done that we're still waiting to get paid on, right? On some of these, right?
Yeah.
If we would have kept it small and kind of understood a little bit about their business and they understood like how you guys work, like then you could kind of date before you get married a little bit here. Like it's like, hey, let's start small. And maybe it's good to like look at some of these brands to start small, give them some good brand exposure, start small. And usually those are the ones that turn into like when you have a jersey patch open up, like, hey, you start really small. Now here's something that's really big. When I was selling it at BYU Athletics, we had a really small deal with Qualtrics, super small. And we all know now Qualtrics, Ryan Smith, owner of Jazz, like Qualtrics blew up. It's a multi-billion-dollar company now. Well, Qualtrics ended up being a huge sponsor and doing some specific title type of sponsorships that we did at BYU. And so I think that's like kind of a good example of this, where it's like, hey, they might spend 15 to 30,000 to start, but then they might be a multi-million-dollar customer, down the road. So I think with some of these, it's probably better to start small. And I know that might be contradictory to some of the people on here, but I think if you want to make sure you get paid, and you want to make sure that they're in it for the long term with you, start small with them. And hundreds of thousands of dollars could be small, to be clear. Right. So start small, and then grow them into a bigger, larger partnership with a potential, jersey patch kind of relationship.
Jason, I always laugh because I'll probably say these two companies, and I know there's certain attendees here that'll cringe as soon as I say it. So I won't say their whole name, but a certain sponge company and a certain steak company that we're all getting. I'm still waiting to get my commission check on, by the way, because they never paid, right? But it stems back to, and it's funny. I just was emailing him yesterday, or texting him yesterday, was Greg Economou. He taught me something that changed my whole career when it came to sales. I used to just sell. I didn't care who the heck I sold to, until he got me to think of things like, hold on a second, you got to look out for your brand. So your team, and I'm going to make fun is Bob's Auto what you want to grow your business, even if they're giving you $5 million?
Joe's Aquarium and Bob's Auto.
That's right. You got two of them, right? It's sorry to Bob's Auto, right? But is that good for your brand? So when you have these companies come in, sometimes as much as you want to take that, yes, I'll take it. They're offering X, let's take it and move. Take a step back for a minute, evaluate it. Is this going to be good for my brand? Is this going to help my brand grow? Because again, if no one knows who the heck it is, again, is that going to help? I don't know. I could tell you probably not so, because when you're going after the Lexuses of the world or whatever type A-list company you're going after, they're looking at what companies are with you already. And if they see Bob's Auto, are they going to say, you know what, let's step up? I don't know about that. I think question marks start happening. So again, as much as you want to take it, you want to deep dive, take a step back, and maybe you go with this company as, hey, let's start something smaller, because is that going to be good for your brand? And again, if they come in and they go out of business, that's not good for your brand.
Yeah, totally.
Not at all. Actually, what I'm going to do, I put, this has been a conversation I've been having a lot lately. I actually put together kind of a little checklist about the pros and cons and some things you can do when you're working with these kinds of brands. What I'll do is I'm going to post that in our, the Sponsor CX, the LinkedIn group, Sponsorship Central. So if you go there after the webinar, I'll post that later today, but take a look for that. It kind of covers exactly some of the things that Jason and Doug have just been talking about things to think about when you're sitting down with those kinds of companies. Just before we move off the patch question, a quick question from Arnold, who asks, should college sports be considering international companies for jersey patch partners? Are we ready for international partners? Doug, you're nodding your head. What do you think about that?
Look at USA. I'm going to switch sports, but I'll go back to college. Look at USA women's soccer. I mean, you got Volkswagen. That's not an American company, right? I mean, that's, you kind of, that one. And so it's going to happen, whether we like to or not. It will happen, 100%. It's not going anywhere. Also, just know, right? All these
we'd like to see Ford. We'd like to see Ford on there, right? Good,
that's
all
right.
American, but
that's right.
International is going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And just look at all the conferences that are going south of the border now to have games, right? To get more people talking about that, more eyeballs. So we are, just as the NBA is expanding globally and the NFL is, so is college. Look, college football, how many games start over in Ireland, every year and everything.
Brazil, there's one next year in Brazil. I'm trying to remember who's doing it, but my good friend Dan Barrett set it up. There's a game in Brazil. Can't remember who the teams are though, but yeah, there's international is going to be big in college athletics for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Interesting question, and thank you all for sending in all these great questions. If your price is increasing next season, so the price for the sponsorship, when is it best to mention the increase if it was not part of the current contract? There was no kind of built-in escalator, I guess, especially with some of the companies that need time to budget for adjustments. Interesting question there. Any thoughts on that?
I think yeah, it's a great question. But again, it all stems back to is being very transparent with the company, but finding out, like, get out the calendar and find out when they talk about certain things. Hey, when is budget season right here? And when do when you go in there, when is it locked and everything? So the more you know, the more you are proactive of getting out in front of that. Look, it's always a tough conversation to have. There's no question. Hey, I was selling it for X, now it's Y. It's tough. There's no question. Yeah. But you got to lean into relationships. But why? Why is something happening? But that's when it comes back to is, always people say you under promise, over deliver. But what are they receiving? What did they get? What was the value in that? And you really have to pay attention to that, because if you have all these great numbers to show them, great, the increase should be okay. But if what they're getting, there really isn't that return on investment, they're not going to return. So you've got to get down to what they receive, find their pain points, right? Show that return on investment for them. And if you hit that, that increase is going to be a much easier conversation than if you don't.
Doug nailed it. And really, it just comes down to negotiation 101. And you can use this for any negotiation. Always bring the numbers and the facts. If you can do that, then you have a chance to get as much value as you can out of it. But if you come and just say, well, that's what so-and-so's paying over in another city or demographic or DMA, it's like, I don't care. Like, that doesn't matter to me as a brand, right? But if you can show the value, and Doug's right, it will always be a tough conversation and it will always be negotiated. And you may not always get the full price that you want, but if you bring value and you bring numbers and you bring the facts, you should be able to get some sort of an increase.
And never play cards with a guy that has a first or last name of a city or a state right there. As long as you do that, you're good in life. But no, I go back to, baseball arbitration, right? I mean, you literally sit in a room where one person says the player stinks, and then the player's agent says, no, he's great. And you kind of duke it out. And after you agree, you shake hands and you walk out together. Right. And you're not going to have those negotiations. Yeah, exactly. But you've got to have those numbers, right, Jason? So you've got, and that will prove your worth, prove your value.
We've got a few more questions, and we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left here. So Edward's got a great question. With less and less in-person meetings, how do you develop the personal relationships that are so critical to these long-term deals? That's a great question.
Dude, Doug's the king of relationships. Let's go, Doug.
Yeah, exactly.
No, again, I think that, people forget that personal level is so big, right? So, it is maintaining that relationship. I'm not big on emails, but you also have to find out what makes that person tick. How am I going to get to Jim? How am I going to get to Jason? So whether it is a Zoom call or a text or whatever it is, but you've got to, again, as much as I'll forget about this conversation, right, in 10 minutes from now, I go back to, like, when I talk about Jason, I know those things. I get to know him as a person, and I know what makes him tick, things about him. And to really, and you're not just using that, but you're saying, hey, look, that's what makes Jason the person that he is today. This is what makes Jim the person that he is today. So you've got to just find out those ways and force yourself to get on the phone, force yourself to get on a Zoom, force yourself to do it. I know it's so easy just to hide, right? But as much as I'd like to, you've got to get out there. And yes, you're not always able to get in person, but what are some other ways to connect with that person?
Yeah, it's finding what they like to do and trying to find ways to do it with them, right? Could be travel, it could be going to a game together, it could be golfing, it could be, in my case, you want to my heart, it's fly fishing, right? You can fly fish together, like, that's awesome, right? So fly fishing, golf, attending games together, like, those don't have to be an official meeting, right? Like an in-person meeting. Just find out what makes them tick, what they like, could be going to the theater with them, right? There's just so many opportunities, and inviting them to come. You know, if you have a significant other or spouse, or, you know, that you can invite theirs to come with you, right? And be able to attend together, you know, different events. The more that you can do that, the better.
Jason, it's funny. I see Judd Norris is on here, right? So who's a partner of ours, and Judd and I've known each other for years. And how do we connect? The Jayhawks. He's always been a Jayhawk fan. He knows I'm a Jayhawk, and every time we talk, we are going to talk basketball during this conversation, no matter what, right? So again, we'll always have that connection. So make connections with people, and again, I always say this to people, and I'm not going to curse when I say this, but don't be an a-hole, because no one wants to do business with an a-hole. I say this to people all the time, right? Because when you, again, is just be good, right? And help others.
That feels like it should be on a throw pillow or something.
Good, right?
I'm sure somebody somewhere else probably has that on the throw pillow.
Maybe I should put that on my next pair of shoes I get, Jason. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Who wants a sponsor?
Yeah. Great.
There we go. And, you know, and I think it's also, I mean, my advice would be, don't use the fact that you can have a Zoom meeting as an excuse not to have an in-person meeting. It's so easy to fall back on it. It's like, oh, let's just hop on a Zoom. I mean, if you're in the same area as another person, don't schedule a Zoom call. Say, let's go and sit down and have lunch or coffee or whatever it is, or let's go to a ball game. You know, I think, again, you know, I can't do that with Jason and Doug, because they're in Atlanta, Salt Lake, and I'm in Chicago. But I can do it with, you know, so many people that I'm in the same city with. I should, you know, probably do that more often.
Jim, and one more thing I think to really think about is, especially when the people selling sports, you know, everyone is so, you know, I'm looking to my right, there's a 80-inch television right there, right? So you're just so, oh, I'm just going to watch it. Get them to a game live. Because when you experience it live, this is what you get. You forget about that when you're watching at home. It's important you watch them, I get it, but get them live to a game and have those conversations. You know, I just went to the Atlanta Hawks game last week with my wife, and that was the game that literally at the buzzer that almost happened, that took them into overtime on that one. And the crowd was electric and stayed to the very end. And you remember those things. That's the memories that you have. So for those of you on here that come from the team side, you know, if get them to a game, because that's what it brings back to me. It brings back memories of growing up as a kid, going with my dad and talking baseball. That's where I learned baseball, was watching it with him. Right piano play. That's where we learn. So get them at the game, get them connecting, give them that love again. Because again, it's so easy to say, I'm just gonna stay home like that. Trust me, I know how it is. But I mean, as I'm looking at Judd again, is I chose University of Kansas by going to a basketball game. Halftime of the game, I said, this is where I'm going. It hit me right here. Yeah. So that's what you do. So go to play, get them to your spot, and they'll fall in love again. They'll fall in love with that sport or the event.
Okay, the last thing here too before we go, Jim, because I know you're about to wrap it up. So Doug's a Jayhawk and I'm a Cougar. I'm a BYU Cougar. AJ DeBonsa or Darren Peterson, #1 in the NBA draft?
I mean, you want me to say? You know,
vote, but I say AJ. So
he's a solid #2. Solid #2.
I do like Darren Peterson's game.
Both are good. Both are good choices. Both are
he's
good.
The closest to Kobe Bryant I think I've ever seen. So it's really good.
Well, as a Northwestern Wildcat, I cannot enter that conversation, sadly. Maybe soon. Maybe soon. We got to figure out what we're doing on the hard court. But we are at time. Wanted to just say, first of all, thanks to Doug and Jason, and I've seen a lot of great comments. So it looks like people got something out of this conversation, which was that was our goal. So we appreciate all of you being here and asking your questions. There were some questions that we did not get to. So follow up with us on LinkedIn, and we'll take a look at the questions that we didn't get to answer. But if you think of things anytime you have questions, all of us connected to Sponsor CX, we want to help you out. That's what we're around for. So please don't hesitate to reach out. just as a final reminder before we say goodbye, we will have another webinar 2 weeks from today. That's April 28th. We're going to be joined by Derek Russell, who's a senior manager of global activation for United Airlines. So we'll be taking a look at some of the exciting stuff that United's doing, along with just talking about maybe some trends in the travel space. Always an interesting category to talk about. So hope many of you will join us for that. Look for information coming out about that soon. So thanks again for everybody for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a
Thanks.
great day.